Welcome to Think Big with Dan and Qasim. Join hosts Dan Melnick and Qasim Masood as they explore big ideas, limitless possibilities, and engage with visionaries, entrepreneurs, and thought leaders who dare to dream big, get inspired, motivated, and find practical tips for personal growth. Think big, dream bigger, and ignite your potential.
Welcome to the Think Big with Dan and Qasim. Today, our guest is Nick. So, Nick, how are you, from where you are, and what you do?
My name is Nikolas. I'm doing great. I'm currently in Boise, Idaho, and I'm a healthcare and tech entrepreneur.
Nice. So, in the tech, healthcare along with tech is a complex thing, I believe, where there are a lot of regulations and a lot of things to take care about. So, it's a difficult decision, I believe, to get into this business. But what was the inspiration to start this business?
I'll give you a little bit of my background. I've been in healthcare for about 15 years. So I went to undergraduate, graduated, and my brother-in-law was working for this big healthcare company. And he said, "Hey, I think you might be interested in this." And so I threw my hat in the ring and ended up getting a ton of experience that I had no place getting. They administered what's called a pulse test, where they just they take your pulse and say, "Okay, you're a warm body. We'll throw you in to any opportunity we have." And I got a ton of experience with this company, growing from about a $20 million business to a $150 million business in the course of 3 years, and learned how to do acquisitions, transition them, negotiate, all that stuff. And about a month before COVID happened, my wife was pregnant. And February 19th, 2020, I'll never forget it, I lost my job. It sucked. I had already been sort of in the back of my mind thinking about doing my own thing and what the next step would be. And the company that I was working for at the time was having financial issues. And I had told them that, hey, I'd like some equity, or I'm going to do my own thing. And so they went out and raised money. And one of the contingencies was they had to term some people, and they knew I was looking anyways. So they termed me, and it freaking sucked. My wife was literally in labor. They called me while she was in labor, and I'm like, "Okay, I'll come meet with you because there's some crazy stuff going on." And they told me they were terming me at the end of the month. And it seemed like terrible timing at the time. But looking back, I'm so grateful, because if I had stayed for another couple of weeks, COVID would have hit. I would have been traveling. I would have been gone 5 days a week. It was an awful time, all while I have a newborn at home. And instead, I was spending my days with my newborn and my two other boys, looking for the business that I would eventually buy, and just figuring out what the next steps were. So during that time, I knew that I wanted to have my own business, but I wasn't quite sure how I wanted it to look. So I ended up buying a medical billing and medical practice management company based here in Boise. And at the same time, my brother-in-law worked for, or owns, a skilled nursing facility company. And he said, "Hey, if you're going to move up here, why don't you start a home health and hospice?" That was my experience with us. So I'm like, okay, how do I do both? I recruited somebody to run the medical billing and medical practice management company, and I started a home health and hospice, and that kicked off like the craziest 3 years of my life. Concurrently, I grew the home health and hospice to about $10 million in a 3-year period. And then we also grew the medical billing company from a $4 million to $6 million company. We sold the medical billing company in 2022, 3x'd our money, which was fantastic. And then just last year, 6 months ago, I sold the home health and hospice company to a large home health and hospice company. And so the last 6 months, I've been working with that company as we transition to home health and hospice. But I've started turning my focus to, as everybody else is, AI, and AI in particular in healthcare, and how we can improve a lot of the processes, improve a lot of the inefficiencies that are in healthcare. Because healthcare in the United States, at least, is still a really old school system. The way that we get referrals from patients is still by fax. So anyways, that's I can go into that part of the story, but that's my background. That's how I became an entrepreneur, and that's what I'm working on right now.
That's great. So, in terms of AI, like when you're talking about the AI, how did you find the gap in the market where you started thinking about involving AI in it?
Yeah, so one of the big things within healthcare, not one of the big things, I hate to say it, zoom out. If you're a clinician, there are two things that you do. You take care of patients, and you document how you take care of patients, right? Those are the biggest two things that you do as a clinician anywhere.
Yeah.
Taking care of patients is pretty straightforward, but the documentation part changes with every setting. A hospital system, a skilled nursing facility, an assisted living, a primary care physician, a specialist, a surgery center, they all have different EMRs that they operate on. An EMR is an electronic medical record. And so the big issue is interoperability between those medical record systems. And so how do they take one patient from one and transfer them to another? How does a physician transfer a patient to a home health company? They fax the home health company a face sheet with all the patient's information, and the home health company prints it out and hand keys it into their computer to upload or create a new patient in their system. That's an example of some of the big inefficiencies by not having interoperability between electronic medical record systems. So from my perspective, if you can train a language model or prompt engineer a language model to understand, hey, read this PDF, pick out this information, and then you're working with agents on the back end that will then go and populate your electronic medical record with that information, you're eliminating a lot of the administrative burden and headache that are being put on these companies, which right now they're all getting less reimbursement, they're all getting more work to do, they're getting higher acuity patients. How are they going to take care of these patients if they're getting less money? How are they going to take care of these patients if they're getting more regulation placed on them? Well, they have to gain some efficiency somewhere. And so, in my mind, figuring out a way to integrate artificial intelligence, the LLMs, into the clinical setting is the way we do it.
Makes sense. So, I believe when you are using AI in the field of health tech, then you have to be aware about the HIPAA compliance, and there are some other
Mhm.
compliance as well. So, did you research on it, and like your
Yeah.
solution is completely compliant to it?
Yeah, there's a couple different ways you can solve for that. So, like you said, we have in the United States, but around the world, an expectation of privacy when it comes to our medical records. In the United States, we actually have a law around it. With AI, you can ensure HIPAA compliance one of two ways. One, the company that you're working with has a HIPAA compliant
Mhm.
solution, or two, you run the artificial intelligence locally so
Mhm.
that there is no data stored in the
Mhm.
cloud.
Mhm.
We're experimenting with both, but what we've chosen to do is go with a company that has a HIPAA compliant technology that allows us to upload the patient data. But in a worst case scenario, because we can save almost everything locally, it isn't as big of an issue. So we did definitely have to craft it and think about, hey, how does HIPAA play into us utilizing this patient information? But for us, it hasn't really been a massive issue at this point.
Completely makes sense. So, what are your plans for growth or expansion in future?
For me right now, the plan is to build a product that works, which we're in the process of. We're about to release our first product, which is helping skilled nursing facilities actually code the admissions that are coming in. So going in and identifying, hey, based on this patient's paperwork, this is what you could be coding for, because there's a big gap right now and missed opportunity to generate revenue by missing codes. And once the value is actually proven there, then we can iterate and add other features onto it. But right now, there's just a big question mark around, can artificial intelligence even help in
Mhm.
these settings, especially with mom and pop organizations? So we really want to have a tool that proves, at least in one specific case, hey, this is the value proposition, and then from there expand out. Once one facility uses it, it will catch on like wildfire because they're all trying to figure out a way to be more efficient and save money.
Makes sense. Makes sense. So, in terms of like achieving these goals, or are you facing any challenges, any problems, any bottlenecks?
Yeah, the biggest problems have been the character window. I think I'm saying that right.
Yeah.
Where we're not actually creating an LLM. What we're doing is iterating our way to a good prompt that capitalizes or utilizes an LLM that's been already created. So we're using Anthropic, for example. They have Claude, which is their LLM, but that's really been the biggest challenge for us is it would be nice. It's just a lot more expensive, but it would be nice if we could create our own LLM based on,
Mhm.
hey, here's Medicare's regulations, here's the patient documentation, all of that. But we don't. I mean, that's a really expensive process to go through, and we can get 99% of the way there just by prompt engineering. But prompt engineering is a very iterative process, and it's very manual and time intensive. So somebody has to actually go through and look at the data. How does it compare with what the human did? Oh, okay, you coded this, the system coded this. You have to then take a clinician and the engineer and have them have a conversation. So like that part is kind of hairy,
Mhm.
but in terms of kind of where we've been over the last 10 years, it's a short window, but for me, it's been frustrating because I'm like, all right, let's get this out. There's no reason why it shouldn't be out at this point. And it's just been an iterative process to get to the spot where it's actually usable.
Okay, so being an AI expert, I'm an AI expert as well, so I can
Are
suggest
you?
you, yeah.
Oh, please. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I can suggest you one thing over there. Like whenever you are going towards your own LLM, the biggest challenge for you at that time would be the strong people who have strong knowledge on the domain, who have strong grip on the domain. They can give you any sort of like any answer that is required to build that LLM. Like the ones who have the domain knowledge in the particular business. That's it.
Okay.
The rest of the things can be handled in any case. So yeah, we can
So how do you suggest I handle them?
like just to find the people who have good domain of that business, like
Oh, I see what you're saying.
about the healthcare, who have
Yeah.
good information. They can guide the ones who are working on the LLM, obviously.
Yeah, that's totally true. Up until the last month, the operator who we had creating our tool was working alone.
Hmm.
And so finally we're like, hey, move up here. This is the clinician you'll be working with. This is the facility you'll be working with. And so they've been working with them a lot more closely. And
Hmm.
that's been a game changer for us because you're not guessing anymore. You're actually taking it to them, getting feedback, incorporating that feedback, taking it back to them. The iterative process moves along a lot quicker. So
Yeah.
agreed.
Obviously, that's the
What
part
other
of it.
advice do you have for me as an AI expert?
We can set up a call on it. I have a lot of advices.
No,
So,
but
yep.
the cool thing about healthcare in particular
Hmm.
is on the what's it called? Not pharmacological sciences, but drugs. We'll just say
Hmm.
drugs.
Yeah.
Pharmaceuticals. There's the word.
Yeah.
For pharmaceuticals, there's a big math component that you need to solve, and the LLMs aren't there yet, right? They're large language models. They're not large math models. Hopefully, OpenAI actually did figure that out, and that's what the whole kerfuffle was with Sam Altman a month or so ago. But let's just put that aside. The cool thing about the healthcare setting is it's qualitative. It's documentation from clinicians who are using their own words to describe a patient's progression. And for walking, they may use different words. They may say patient's gait. They may say patient's stride. They may say patient's step. So you can't just control F your way to finding all of that within a PDF document. You have to train or at least prompt an LLM to understand how to infer what they're reading in the note.
Yeah.
And if you can unlock that, there's a huge amount of value that unlocks from a quality assurance standpoint, from an interoperability standpoint, cutting down time on the administrative functions. So to me, that's where I see a ton of opportunity. Isn't necessarily on diagnosing, although that is important. It's all of the administrative functions that come along with understanding what did the clinician write
Hmm.
and how does that translate to taking
Yeah.
care of the patient. So
Yeah. Makes sense. So, how do you acquire the customers, new customers?
no, it's the contacts that I have right now for me. That's where I'm starting. I've worked in the industry for the last 15 years. So I'm going out to people that I know first, proving it
Hmm.
and gathering data. So, we worked with one skilled nursing facility and got back some data saying that 60% of their patients saw an increase of $4,500 every 30 days in revenue. And once you have that information and you can go and show that to other facilities that I know, they're a lot more likely to jump in. So for me, the customer acquisition is really about reaching out to my own internal network, generating data that shows efficacy, and then broadening out either through cold outreach or warm introductions. The nice thing about healthcare is that every provider is listed online. They have to be registered with the government. So you can get these lists and cold contact them either on the phone, email, text, whatever way that you can find. So contacting them is really not the issue. You can get a response from a lot of people. It's the ability to show them, hey, here's the data that will show you the impact that you're looking for. And as we have that, you get more and more people interested because it's not just pie in the sky. This is what we think will happen. This is what actually happened once we implemented it.
Makes sense. Completely makes sense. So, what do you believe sets your product apart from the competitors? Like, I'm not sure if you have competitors, but yeah, if you have.
Oh no, it's a good question. I think the biggest thing that sets it apart right now is the fact that I'm focusing on it.
Hmm.
Home health, hospice, skilled nursing facilities is from a macro standpoint, a pretty niche industry. You're talking
Hmm.
about home health and hospice, $10 billion a year
Hmm.
in revenue. But the skilled nursing facility industry, you're talking about $100 billion a year in revenue. So they're big, but people are mainly focusing on the bigger problem, like the platform level problems. How do you integrate AI into an electronic medical record like Epic or a hospital system? Those are, the $1 trillion questions. And
Hmm.
in these smaller niches, I just don't think there's people focusing on them. And if they are focusing on them, they don't have the experience to understand where the pain points are. I think that's really the biggest differentiator is that I've operated in the space for so long. I understand kind of where we could focus quickly and make the most progress. So it's very helpful to have that knowledge. As you know, right now, most of these LLMs are trained on the same or very similar data set.
Yeah.
In the future, then this is my like dream. It would be nice to go to some of these big hospital systems or insurance companies and say, we would love to take your patient data and create your own LLM, because then it will actually create a better model that will lead to better outcomes. But right now, the stuff that we're training with is pretty much all the same. So from a differentiation standpoint, it's not really differentiated. The prompt engineering obviously is a little bit different, but the language model itself is the same as everybody else's. In the future, I'd like to get to a point where we're training our own data set or our own model, but that costs a lot more money. So hopefully we prove this out, make some money, raise some money, create the LLM, and then have something more proprietary.
Completely makes sense. So, what advice would you give to someone who is thinking of starting their own business?
Oh, that's a great question. Just in general,
Yeah, in general.
I think the biggest piece of advice I would give anybody as they're looking at it is to be as structured as possible in your approach. Now, that doesn't mean you can't pivot and you can't make changes, but if you don't have a clear idea of what you're trying to accomplish, then you're not going to get there. And so the first step is, why am I doing this, right? Why do you want to be an entrepreneur? Answer that question. Do you want flexibility and freedom in your personal life? Do you want to be Jeff Bezos and have billions of dollars? Because for you, you want to be known as the person who's really rich. It's not a bad thing. It just recognize which one of those motivators is your motivator. And it could be something totally different, but sit down and actually think, why do I want to start this business? What is it that's motivating me? And once you have that piece, then you go to the next step and say, okay, how do I achieve that? Like, what does my ideal life look like in achieving that goal? If it's, I want to have control over my time and my schedule, then you start looking for a business that allows you to have control over your time and schedule. If you want control over your time and schedule, you don't want to be a doctor, right? Because all of a sudden you're just on call all the time. You want control over your time and schedule, you probably want to have maybe a drop shipping website that uses Shopify as their platform. So for me, it's like being very rigid in thinking. Rigid is the wrong word, but being very intentional in thinking, what am I trying to get out of this? And then solve downstream. Too many people just start with the business. They don't think about why. Why am I doing this? What's my motivation?
So true. That's so true. Thanks for this very valuable advice. So, Nick, let me know if you can share your contact with the people and let the people know how they can reach you.
Yeah, our company's called Co-Founders, cofounders.com. It's a pretty simple website. And
Yeah,
if you're on Twitter, follow me at Co-Founders Nick. Love to have some followers.
that's great. That's great. Thanks, Nick. It was really nice talking
Yeah.
to you. I hope we will stay in touch and we'll meet again. Thanks for joining us today, Nick.
Thanks,
Have
Qasim.
a good day. Have a good day.
You too.
Bye-bye.